You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another review. Modern Life Special, Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling, which just came out today. At the time I'm recording this anyway. Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling is the first thing of Rocko's Modern Life we have seen in a long time. They blasted off into space 20 years ago, and they finally come back. That's the plot. So it's basically about Rocko encountering the modern world. At least that's the implication you get from the trailer. It really has a more focused plot than that. There will be spoilers in this review, so you have been warned. But the main plot of it is Rocko, while he was in space, has been watching this tape of the Fatheads, the show that Ed and Bev Bighead's son, Ralph Bighead, made 20 years ago. And he comes back, and he finds out that the show has not been on the air for years, not even reruns, and he wants to get it brought back. Meanwhile, Conglommo, the business that Ed Bighead is part of, has gone under. So he decides to go look for Ralph Bighead in order to bring back the Fatheads and also save Conglommo. They meet up with Ralph Bighead, who, this is where things get spoilery, is transgender now and identifies as Rachel Bighead. This, of course, causes some tension with Ed Bighead, Ralph's father, and you'd think that that'd have a whole character arc, but really it's just Ed at first doesn't accept it. Ralph, or should I say Rachel technically now, decides to reboot the show anyway, and eventually Ed meets the winds of change, which tell him that he needs to accept change, basically. And Rocko also needs to accept change because when Ralph/Rachel shows the new episode of the Fatheads, it shows a baby Fathead, which wasn't in the show originally, and Rocko didn't like that change. And basically the whole movie has this message of accept change, move on from the past. And while that is a message I can get behind, it's nothing original per se, and it's nothing spectacular. It's kind of cliche, in all honesty, the message is. But, I get it. It's a fine message, I guess. I do think it's ironic for a show that's basically a nostalgia cash grab to have that message of move on from the past. It says, I do like that it says you can appreciate the past, but don't live in it, basically. I don't know if I'd call it preachy, because it doesn't quite go there, I don't think. It was a little weird to have, kind of a message shoved into it, but it makes sense. Rocko's Modern Life has always been about a show about modern life, hence the name. So it makes sense that they would have the modern world and have Rocko have to accept the modern world because he's been in space for 20 years. So I think the message was kind of inevitable with this special because it makes sense. And overall, I think the message was fine. It just wasn't anything great. The whole thing with Ralph Bighead becoming Rachel Bighead was a bit odd. I think choosing Ralph Bighead to be the transgender character was definitely the right choice because he's a secondary character and he doesn't... And he's always had kind of an identity crisis, and he's always had issues with his parents. So I think that's a fair way to do it. And I think that, in all honesty, is probably a natural progression. I think it's a good way to showcase some more modern issues that weren't really a big deal in the 90s when the show originally aired. So it's definitely interesting to have it tackle a different issue. I don't know how I feel about it. I have kind of mixed feelings, in all honesty. It didn't really bother me, per se, because, again, Ralph Bighead makes the most sense to turn transgender. It was just a little odd. The part that made it odd for me was Rocko and Heifer and Filbert have no reaction to this. They're just like, oh, that's awesome, which is fine. That's the reaction people should have. You shouldn't judge people. I think it is good to be accepting. But they've been in space since the 90s. And if you don't know, the 90s was super transphobic and super homophobic. Don't get me wrong, I love the 90s, but you can't pretend it wasn't. I mean, to go and have them just be like, oh, that's awesome, to me didn't really make a whole lot of sense since they've been in space the whole time, but it's fine. It's a kid's show, quote-unquote. Ed Bighead's reaction is exactly what I expected it to be, and it kind of became a very predictable plot once you find out that Ralph has become transgender. After that, it becomes a very cookie-cutter, my dad doesn't accept me, and then he goes through and accepts him. It happens very quick. This is all within the last couple minutes of the movie. And I say movie, but it's only 45 minutes long. Overall, I do think it was a good movie. It had a lot of fantastic jokes. The thing with Spunky ordering tons of mops online and watching 10 hours of mops and getting turned on by it, I found that fucking hysterical. There's this old lady that gets electrocuted, which I was like, fuck, that's fucking dark, and I loved it. Heifer's grandpa is a ghost that keeps possessing things. Really, I think my biggest criticism is they focused entirely on the Fatheads and the Ralph Bighead story, when I was interested in a lot of the other stuff going on. I think that it would have been nice to get maybe a full feature-length movie out of this, or maybe have a couple of different episodes, maybe a 3 or 4 episode special or something, to fully flesh it out and give some of the side plots more attention, because I thought some of them were very interesting. Overall, it was a decent callback, and when it was a decent reunion special, sort of, for all the characters. I do recommend it a lot. I definitely say it is a good special. It's definitely not the best Rocko's Modern Life episode. I feel like the original run had a lot of episodes that were much more entertaining than this, but I got my laughs out of it, and overall, I think it was worth waiting. I enjoyed it, and if there is a DVD release, I will, of course, be buying it. It is definitely different, but it does kind of fit the tone of what Rocko's Modern Life always set out to accomplish, which is to kind of lampoon modern life and kind of showcase modern problems. And since we're in modern times now, that makes sense that they would have more modern problems. So I think it was well done for the most part. I think the message, again, is a little cliche, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But overall, solid special. Definitely not my favorite Rocko episode. One other thing that's small that's worth noting. Choky Chicken has its original name again, instead of Chewy Chicken, so I think that was nice. And it did still have a good share of adult jokes in it, so, you know, it's still Rocko. It still feels like a good Rocko's Modern Life episode. It felt like a Rocko's Modern Life episode, which is because it had the entire original crew behind it. So I'd highly recommend it if you are a fan of Rocko's Modern Life. And this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a great rest of the day.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.